All right, it is the top of the hour, so we are going to jump into our webinar here today, using DISC to increase civility, engagement, and personal leadership. I know there's a lot going on right now, so we appreciate you taking the time to learn a little bit about communication and leadership. Of course, right now in particular, communication and leadership is super important. So we know that you are here today to learn about better, more effective communication and better personal leadership. And we're going to tell you exactly what you can do to increase your effectiveness as a team member and a leader. You're in the right place if you're looking for better ways to communicate with your team. You're in the right place if you're having conflict with the team member and want to mitigate it. You're in the right place if you want tools to better understand your team members. Maybe you want to recognize and celebrate your team members, or maybe you're looking for tools to improve your leadership effectiveness. So we are going to cover all of that good stuff today. What you'll learn today is some DISC profile basics. This is a great webinar if you're not familiar with DISC, because you'll get the opportunity to learn a little bit about it and understand it. If you have taken a DISC assessment, this is also a great webinar for you, because it'll be a good kind of reminder of what DISC is all about and some refreshers on what your profile means. We'll also go over different preferences and challenges for each profile. We'll talk about employee engagement a little bit, and we'll talk a lot about personal leadership. So this is pretty exciting. I've got one comment here. I took the DISC a couple of decades ago, and it does change over time, or does it change over time? The profile itself may not change, but the reports certainly have gotten more comprehensive, I think, over time. So, and thanks for asking a question. While we're at it, I'll just share that questions box is a great place for you to communicate with us. So Tony and I are here today delivering this webinar. I'm manning the questions box. We want this to be interactive. We want to answer your questions in real time. So by all means, please do interact with us along the way, ask questions along the way, and we will be happy to answer them. And
Catherine,
by the way, if you stick around, go ahead, Tony.
I just want to give you full permission to interrupt me at any time. Just an FYI, I don't see any chat coming in on my side, so I'll rely on you to just go ahead and jump on in and interrupt me when you need to.
Sounds good. If we were next to each other, I'd elbow you or throw something at you, but we can't see each other, so I will interrupt you. So yeah, go ahead, and if you stick around until the end, and we intend on ending the webinar at 11:15. So stick around until the end, because we've got some cool stuff for you. Just before we jump in, want to share a little bit about Civility Partners. We've been in business for 11 years, and we were founded on the principle that every employee should feel respected at work and be given the opportunity to thrive. And over the years, we've served a huge array of industries, and we've served, clients ranging from Fortune 500s to small business to nonprofit to government, and really everything in between. So we've seen it all. Civility Partners is a full service HR consulting firm, and we offer services ranging from, a one-time employee handbook all the way up to long-term 2 or 3 year culture change consulting projects. So we really are super full service. And along the way, we've been cited as experts in solving negative and toxic work environments in some cool places, and including NPR and Inc. And I was also a Forbes contributor during the height of the Me Too movement. So that was kind of a cool experience to be able to put my thoughts out there. So I'm Catherine Matthijs-Sandell. That's me on the left there. I'm the CEO and founder of Civility Partners, and I'm a strategic HR consultant and executive coach. My executive coaching is focused specifically on sort of toxic or abrasive or aggressive leaders. Often those folks are highly valued because of their expertise and what they bring to the organization. So I get called in to help them learn new ways to communicate. And Tony is our resident DISC certified trainer and coach. And so Tony, I'll go ahead and let you jump in and introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. And it's so great to be here with you all. And yes, as Catherine mentioned, I also teach DISC, and I have been a mediator for Kearny Mesa Courthouse and for El Cajon Courthouse. So I have an extensive background in conflict resolution. I do a lot of the corporate training work with Civility partners around conflict resolution, inclusive communication, and civility. So it's just really an honor to be here today. And I'll tell you, with all my years of working with conflict resolution, I personally haven't found a faster or easier tool in aiding in the mitigation of potential conflict as the DISC assessment. So I'm very excited to explore this with you today.
Uh-oh, we have a delay in the slide change here. Hang on here.
No worries, I can keep talking. I'm a high eye. So if it's difficult, yeah, there we go. I was gonna say if it's difficult to go back, don't worry. But I love this quote from Henry Winkler. Not only do I think of the fawns, but I also like what he happens to say here, which is assumptions are the termites of relationships. And what I see a lot of in conflict resolution and some of the things that lead to the need for that is that we have a misunderstanding oftentimes of the differences in one another. I assume that you're just like me. You must think like me or act like me. And when you don't, something must be wrong with you. And that's rarely the case. Usually it's just a style difference and then miscommunications go from there. So one thing that's important to remember is that there's a saying, employees join companies, but they leave managers. In fact, the research says on a Gallup poll of more than 1 million US workers, they concluded that the #1 reason people quit their jobs was a bad boss or immediate supervisor. So if you think about it, 75% of people, workers who voluntarily left their job did so because of their bosses and not the position itself. So in spite of how good a job might be, people were quitting because of the unhealthy work relationship. So DISC is all about raising awareness of both ourselves and others.
Tony, I swear I'm clicking the slide. It's like every time I do it,
Don't
the bar
worry.
in GoToWebinar gives me the red mark. Okay, there you go.
No
And real
worries.
quick, we do have one question about the, are we going to talk about the emotional intelligence version of DISC? I'll let you answer that, Tony.
So there are some DISC profiles that combine one or more assessments with DISC, and this particular webinar and the DISC assessment that we're talking about is just DISC on its own. So it does not include other assessments as a tack-on. I just want to make sure that answers that person's question.
Yep, all good.
Okay. Awesome. All right, thank you for asking that. For those who have taken DISC, this will be, as Catherine said, a great reminder. For those where DISC might be a little bit new and you're still uncertain, what the heck is DISC? I want to make sure that you realize that it is not a skill assessment. It is a style assessment, a style of how we communicate and interact with one another. And kind of a fun little way to look at some measurable behaviors would be to use an elevator analogy. So for example, if you're a high D and you walk onto an elevator and you notice that there's someone down the hallway, most likely coming to your same elevator, you're not really thinking about that. You're thinking about what you need to get to do, and you push that closed door button, right? Nothing personal. You just got to get where you're going. High I's, which I am, those are the folks, it doesn't matter how many people are in that elevator. If you see someone coming down the hall, you will literally hold that elevator open, welcome that person on, delaying everybody, of course, but it's all about bringing people together. So that's a really high I. A high S, what they would most likely exhibit on an elevator behavior analogy is they're the individuals who will make sure everyone who's coming off the elevator come off first, everyone who's going on the elevator, they'll allow them on next. And then most likely when they step onto the elevator, they'll find a nice little section where they're not standing in people's space. So they may go to the corner or back of the elevator. And so that's just an accommodation style that's very prevalent with high S's. The high C's, these are more accuracy-based folks. So these are the individuals who might go on the elevator, check that permit, and if it's even a day out of date, they may choose to take the stairs. So it's a little bit of a joke, but it exhibits some of the different styles where we can start to see, wow, it's easy to take something in the wrong context that's not really intended. And for those of you who want to see what DISC is, plain and simple, it comes down to these two different areas. One is you're either fast-paced or deliberately paced, And then your orientation, you're either task-oriented or people-oriented. And so you can see the quote here from Peter Drucker that says, the most important thing in communication is hearing what isn't said. So for example, as I'm speaking to you, you can observe my tone, my pace. If you could see me on a Zoom, for example, you could see my body language. And you can hear the focus of what's important to me by what I'm talking about. So whether it's just task orientation or just people orientation or a little mixture of both. So let's see what we can determine if we look at a practical application of this. And this is where I'm going to ask you to use your chat box and be a little interactive. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to describe each one of these individuals, and hopefully you know who they all are. If not, I'll give a little bit of a synopsis and see if you can guess what style they are. Are they high D, high I, high S, or high C? So first, if we look at Ellen DeGeneres, she is a TV personality. She's a comedian. She's very gregarious. She loves to dance and have fun. She likes to make a difference for people. So who do you think, what style do you think she would represent?
All right, we got some answers coming in here. Go ahead and use your questions box, type in your answer. All right, we got all A pluses here. Everybody's got the influence answer.
Woohoo! Yeah, she's fast-paced, she's people-oriented, she's all about making a difference, inspiring others. Next, we have Nelson Mandela. So he's an anti-apartheid revolutionary and former president of South Africa. He's very concerned about making change in a country. And if you've ever tried to make change in a country, you know that's not a fast thing to do. And so just, you know, giving some hints out there. He's also very concerned for his citizens. So do we have some guesses on what he might be?
We've already got the S coming through.
We've
got some C also.
All right. So that's perfect. I love that there's some difference there, because if we think about what his orientation is, he's trying to change a government, but he's doing it through what way? Through influencing people, right? So he's very connected to his people. He cares a lot about his people. When he talks about the changes, it's not just about economics, it's about justice and civility and equal rights, right? So it's very, very people oriented. So I can see where his approach is very steady. It's very deliberate. So for those of you who said C, you're not far off. His pace is absolutely the same as a C, but he does happen to be a high S. Now, Judge Judy, I probably don't even need to give you her attributes for those of you to start guessing what high letter she is, but I'll tell you, she does not listen to backstory. If the law says this and you didn't do it, you were doing it against the law, verdict, done, right? And
you
you guess
got all the D's coming through.
Right, and she's an extreme example of a D, of course. And unfortunately, I think sometimes Ds get a bad rap because they are so quick-paced and so task-oriented. But that's partly what makes for good TV for her is that fast-pacedness. And of course, that leaves Albert Einstein as our very discovering truths and focus on analysis and the presentation of data, of course, makes him that high C. He's very focused on the numbers. He's very focused on finding that one answer to the big question. So he's a great contemplative person, an example of high C. Any questions on that?
I'm just waiting. I hit the mark. There we go. My internet apparently in this time that we're in. Okay.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's interesting to speak to that because I think as we are all transitioning and all going through changes, that it's going to teach us patience because that's really the only thing we have, right? So if we take a little longer between slides, don't worry. This here is an example of the layout for the assessment for DISC. And this is an example of a friend of ours that permitted us to use it. And as you can see, she is both high D and high I. She's a lower S, lower C. And I would like to explain the graph a little bit because this is where it starts to get confusing if it's your first time looking at a DISC assessment. So as you can see the letters, the D is for dominant, and that's your preference for how you solve problems. The high I, or the I itself, stands for your preference around connecting to people. The high S, that would be your preference for how you connect with planning. And then the high C connects to your preference for procedural. So the next thing to look at would be this middle line called the energy line, that dotted blue line. A lot of people, when they look at graphs, and we've been taught this, that the higher the bars, the better it must be, right? If your company's above the middle, then you're doing great. If it's below the middle, not so great. I would love you to wipe that slate clean while looking at this graph, because that's really not what the graph is intended to mean. So for example, if it's above the energy line, that means that those preferences are quite high. In fact, in the case of our friend here, her D and her I are very, very close to almost 100%, right? So she's very, very, when we talk about being a high I or a high D, she happens to be both. I'm a very high I, everything else of mine is below the energy line. And so we'll get into what that means here in just a moment. But I do want to share with you that a question was asked earlier, does your style change? And your natural style will not change in the same way that if you were brought up speaking English and you spoke English until you were an adult, and then you moved to France, there's absolutely, you can learn French and you can adapt and you can get more proficient at it the more you do it. But your natural preference, your most ease in language will be in English. And so very much that's what DISC is like. You have a style of communication that is your preference, a style of interaction that is your preference. And yes, you can absolutely adapt to different roles in your agency or how you stretch to interact with someone else that might have a different style than yours, but your preference will not change. And the way to look at this, if you've taken DISC and you wonder, how does this get assessed? I know it's an algorithm, but what are they basing it on? It's actually based on what you like the least. And I'll give you an example. Catherine, would you play with me on this a little bit?
Sure.
Okay, so what is your favorite breakfast food?
My husband makes pretty good chilaquiles.
Woo! All right. And what is your favorite dinner food?
Sushi.
And if you visited Costa Rica, what would be something you might want to eat down there?
Something that I would want to eat. I don't know, some, Costa Rica food.
Right? Something local, something to explore. So as you can see,
Yep.
Catherine's responses changed depending on what time of day it was. It changed maybe on where she was traveling to. Her preferences moved around. But let me ask you this, Catherine, what is something, no matter what time of day, no matter what country you're in, you would not eat at all?
I would not eat any of the bug type of delicacies that some, people eat. I couldn't eat a bug.
Perfect. Not eating bugs for me. There's no way I would eat mayonnaise. I don't care where I am. So that's why it's very strong reaction typically. People know what they don't like. So that is your natural graph. So if we can switch to the next one, whenever it appears, there we go. You're going to see, in this case, there's the natural graph on the right-hand side. This person, they're going to be that 24/7 no matter where. On the left-hand side, this is what they probably look like the day that they took this assessment. This assessment is based on what you like the best, which means that where you are in that time frame for that day, based on the 3 R's, which are the role you're in, the responsibility you have, and the relations that you're interacting with in that day. So for example, if you took the DISC assessment this week as opposed to a month ago, this left-hand side would probably look very different. A lot of us are being asked to stretch right now into roles we're not necessarily comfortable with. If you're not a technology person, and now everything that you do is now online and through new technology you probably just had to learn last week, you're going to see that that graph will change a lot. In fact, what this graph tells me with that high C going higher is that this person was expected to do something that required more accuracy. For example, maybe this person was placed into, or maybe this person is a manager who does budgets once a month. And in this particular day that they took the test, they also, or the assessment, they also had to do budgets. Their need for accuracy went up. What this tells me is if this person were placed in this role for a very long time, there is a possibility this person can burn out. because it's not their natural preference. It doesn't mean they can't do it, doesn't mean they're not good at it. It just means it's not their natural preference. So this is also a great tool for managers who are looking at whether their people are well suited for the positions that they're in. So let's go ahead and go through the graph so that we have an understanding of how they work and what they mean. So for high Ds, what you're going to notice is that they are very oriented towards problem solving, risk taking. They love handling situations with great expediency. So they're very quick. They usually speak very quick. They're very solution and driven oriented. They love conquering challenges. It actually gives them energy. And one thing that high Ds have to be considerate about in their interactions with others is sometimes that their assertiveness of wanting to get something done or doing it in a fast way can actually be a bit demanding on some of the other styles. And so I like to refer to being aware of your emotional bank account. And if you are too demanding on people, meaning you're making withdrawals from them, that pretty soon you can be emotionally bankrupt with that person, meaning that you're hurting the trust between you and that individual. So that's just something that high Ds can keep an eye out for.
And I'll add to that as well. You know, as somebody who specializes in coaching people who are aggressive or abrasive, or sometimes called workplace bullies, often I see just in the feedback I get when I do the 360 interviews for coaching, that they are definitely high Ds. They're focused on getting things done and moving quickly. And so and also because they can be sort of demanding, you know, that's not helping with that perception that they're a bully. So any of the four profiles could certainly be somebody who's engaging in bullying. I'm not saying it's only the Ds, but Ds tend to be the ones that communicate more sort of aggressively because they're frustrated when things aren't moving quickly.
Yeah. And I think the individual that asked about emotional intelligence earlier, it really does come down to awareness, because an aware high D, awesome. An unaware high anything, not so awesome.
Right.
Yeah. So here we have an example of a lower D, and what that would be an individual who'd be more reflective. They would like to gather more data before offering an opinion, so they're a little bit more reserved in that quickness. And for example, I'm a lower D and I'm a really high I. So the way that I gather information is usually through other people. I like to involve people in a collaborative way to figure something out. So that's just an example. And what we're not going to do is talk about in great depth when you're closer to that middle energy line. But when you are closer to that middle energy line in any of the styles, just know that what that means is that you have the most flexibility between the two ways of being. So you could either be really fast, direct, or you could be more contemplative, for example. All right, so high Is, what they are known for is having a real desire to be influential and inspiring to other people. They're energized by frequent connection with people. They love to express themselves openly. And there's a couple challenges. Number one, during this time with COVID, it can be particularly isolating feeling because there's an energy that they get by being around people, by being social. And so things that could be done by email, if you can perhaps do it by Zoom so you can see the individual, that would help some of us high Is out. Another challenge for high Is to bear in mind, and this is something I always have to remind myself about, is that our enthusiasm is not always welcomed. We can get really exuberant, which can be kind of dominating in meetings, or it can be just a little bit too much for some other styles. And if we aren't careful, that's another area where we can go into emotional bankruptcy. The low Is, these are people who are also very people-oriented, but they prefer to be behind the scenes. So for example, being center stage would not be their first, second, or even third choice. They really want to be able to connect. Maybe not the facilitator, but someone who would maybe create the workbook, for example. So their way of contributing, but without being right in the spotlight. Our high S's, these are also individuals who may be very affected by what's going on with COVID right now, because it requires a lot of change and a lot of quick adaptivity which is not something high S's really like. They prefer stable, consistent environments. They love being a team player, and so they're definitely going to make it work. And they love planning and having systems and methods. So a lot of us are creating new systems and methods right now, and it's really day by day for a lot of us. So just, you know, give the high S's a little bit of a heads up as things are changing. That will really help them out. What is beautiful though is that they're able to stay calm under pressure. So these are some of the people that you're definitely going to want to have around your team to bring the team to a cohesive place. One of their challenges, they can be so concerned about change that they can be observed as being more of a status quo lover. And it's not necessarily the case. I really appreciate high S's on teams because they ask a lot of questions about why change needs to happen. And that's a great thing. I think anyone should be able to answer that and answer it clearly, and that will help satisfy their questions. The low S's, what they're known for is someone who loves to be spontaneous and brainstorm. So not as careful as the high S. They're a little bit more relaxed about timelines. They're open to new approaches. So great for teams. The high C's, these are individuals that want to make sure that procedures are being followed and that there's accuracy there. They want to be able to have time to analyze situations or issues. Also, they're very logical and they like facts. So as many reasons behind things that you can offer, you're going to offer our high C's a great comfort level. They have very high standards and usually produce really quality work. So one thing that you can help the high C's out right now during this time is by offering them information in advance of any meetings that you might have so that they have time to analyze, go over, and give you thoughtful answers when you ask them during the meeting itself. One thing that the high C should be aware of, though, is that you can produce a paralysis by analysis. So their drive to have exacting figures may actually lead them to get stuck in the details sometimes. Another thing is that these individuals oftentimes are so in their head that they can come across as being a little bit aloof. So just watch out for that. And then our low C's, these are individuals who are more conceptual, they're less specific. They really have a can-do attitude with a big picture viewpoint. And then I'm a low C. Accuracy with paperwork is not usually the highest priority, so I could absolutely agree with that one. One fun thing though is that if rules don't really seem to fit the situation, they're willing to bend them a little bit. So they're a little bit more on the creative side in that sense.
I'm curious, now that Tony's gone through all four of the D's and the highs and the lows, curious who's on the line. Now, whether or not you've taken the assessment, you might have heard some things that sounded like they were describing you. Just curious, type in the question box there. Do you think you're a high D or a high I? High S, high C? We've got some C's and some D's. I'm a high I, and D follows right after on my assessment. All right, so we definitely have a variety, of course.
I love it.
All right, perfect.
There is no perfect style, everyone. You know, which style is better? All of them are awesome. All of them have strengths. All of them have challenges. And on a team, we need all of them. If I had a team of 4, I would want to make sure we have a little bit of everybody because there's such strengths that each one bring to the table. As we are starting to work more remotely these days, it's important to consider when you have people that like to make decisions quickly, for example, like a high D, or that need connection, like a high I, or thrive when there's a plan, like a high S, or like to operate with procedures like a high C. How do you manage all of those personality types, all of those style types, the communication differences? Well, we're going to start to get into not only exploring a little bit more about the differences, but some of the tips that we can begin to offer you is think about, for example, perhaps the last Zoom room meeting that you had, or even an in-person meeting. Let's take a look at some suggestions. So high Ds, how do you, for example, especially on a Zoom room meeting, how do you not suppress ideas in the interest of efficiency and moving through a meeting quickly? Sometimes when we only have a set amount of time, we want to hurry things along. and that can actually suppress a few voices. So that's something we could be mindful of. And then one thing you may want to consider is a bit of a social aspect, like a check-in of some sort to encourage personal team connection. And you can limit time on that, of course, but just so that people feel a little bit more connected. So high eyes, how do we not dominate the conversation with extraneous chatter? Because believe me, I can talk for 2 hours just about what I did yesterday, right? High eyes are good at that. So we have to be a little careful not to dominate or be too overly exuberant while work is trying to get accomplished. We might want to consider, for example, telling people if you want to stay on the line after the meeting, feel free to stay on Zoom and catch up. So that way it gives kind of a side room or the water cooler area for those who want to continue a deeper conversation on that. High S's, how can you be courageous enough to point out things that need to happen in the face of all the stress you see in others? High S's are typically not the group to charge into a lot of conflict. So when there's people who are in this heightened state of stress, we're just encouraging you to be a little bit more vocal than maybe you would, a little bit more of a stretch on that. You might want to consider if we're looking for ways to actually offer your calm in the face of chaos approach that you have. I know your team will greatly appreciate that. Maybe something like reassuring emails or even just modeling good team-centered online etiquette will really help others follow suit with that. And then the high C's, you know, how do you get your need for accuracy met in this ever-changing landscape? People are trying to figure out new platforms. They haven't researched stuff before they got online. This can be really distressing to high C's who are looking for that accuracy, task orientation. So you might want to, for your own self, consider requesting that meeting agendas get sent out with questions or topics of conversation before the day of the actual meeting. So that will really help set everybody up well, not just the high C's.
I'm curious, what are those of you, you all said you had different, you know, you all have your different preferences. I'm like, well, I can't speak. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on something you might want or need in a meeting? So I'm for sure a high D. That whole move through a meeting quickly to get on to the next thing is definitely me. So, you know, I guess I would prefer to have a bit of an agenda or a hard stop time so that I know that at that hard stop time, I'm going to be able to get off and get on to the next thing. So if there's chatter and all of that, it's fine. I just know that I'm going to be able to get off. So that would help reduce some of my anxiety, I guess. So I'm just curious, what are some of everybody else's thoughts on what they need? So one person says, I definitely need my agenda. See if anybody
Catherine, I'm having a hard time just because I can't see you. As a high I, even just being able to see you would create better connection for me. So having that visual component.
Yeah, for sure. We should have done our cameras, but I'm not wearing makeup, so it's not gonna happen. All right, let's see. I've got, it's hard to get a word in with a high I in a meeting. So high I, self-awareness is key. Some other people say agenda, hard stops, ground rules for interactions. We've got, I need to be fully prepared with the agenda and enough background to participate. Let's see, someone else says, I value the opportunity to ask questions and hear what others are thinking. So that's probably an I who said that. Need to have some time to check in at the beginning on how they're doing. Everybody needs to come prepared so we can move through the agenda. Someone says I need actions or goals or something. All right, so just was curious to hear what. Someone says I'm a high I and I miss the social. So yeah, it's this is a new thing we're all in here, and I am also a high I, so I do miss that as well.
I love it, and I know this isn't a webinar on meeting management, but let me tell you, the one on ground rules, that's very key, and you can get a lot knocked out just by knowing what to anticipate as you come into meetings, especially if it's with the same people time after time. I love ground rules. That's fantastic. So yes, I thought it would be fun to go through probably what we're going to be experiencing a lot more of if we haven't already is we usually communicate by email. It's just that kind of a world now. And so how do we identify observable behaviors when we can't even see the person? Well, I'll tell you, it comes through in their text and in their messaging. So here is a quiz that we're going to see if we can guess who the person is. I'm going to tell you a few things to look for. I'm going to let you read it for just a sec while I take a sip of water. What you may be noticing are exclamation points. You may be noticing happy faces. In fact, in case you missed the first one, there's a second one there. There's a lot of extra information like, hey, there's coffee and lunch, right? There's inspiring motivational things about the team having, great team talent and experiences. There's a very big interest in hearing from you and everyone during this meeting. And the tone is very playful. So if you can use the chat box to guess who this person might be style-wise.
Let's see, we got a couple answers. We've got everybody saying the right thing, that it's an I. And before I turn it back over, Tony, I just want to mention too, as we're emailing more, of course, we were already emailing before the state of affairs we're in now. But the idea is that if you're leading a team, you may not do the DISC assessment with your whole team, but these are the types of clues to look for. So then you start to recognize, okay, this team member is an I, so that I know when I email them back, I need to sort of emulate or mirror some of that. So that's why this is valuable. We just need to make sure that we're paying attention, so we're communicating the right way. And one last thing, someone says, I'm not seeing a chat box, just these questions. You're right in the right spot. That's where you're going to type your answers. So my friend Julie, hi Julie, she says she's a high I naturally, but at work she's a high C. And so she says my C is cringing at all the abbreviations in the grammar.
I love it. I love it. That's so perfect, because I'm so high I probably would write an email like that, and you can see how quickly there can start to be breakdown between people just based on how the style is. So that's perfect that you mentioned that. All right, 3 guesses who this person might be. Not even a pleasantry, just be there.
Yep, everybody's saying it's a D.
You got it, you got it. And the interesting thing, let me tell you, I had a coworker who we hang out all the time, but would write me emails like this, and I thought, what is this person having a bad day? Are they upset with me? I didn't realize until much later, and especially now that I know DISC so well, is it's really just about efficiency. There's nothing personal. There's, they're not trying to hurt me by not being elaborate. And I'm not trying to annoy them with my smiley faces, but you can start to see some of those changes in there. All right, the next one.
It's a coming.
Because I added one more.
The red bar.
Yes, I did.
The red bar is staring at me. There we go.
So this is going to be a little trickier because, of course, we have S and C left over, and there's a lot of similarities, especially in emails, about how S's and C's write. And I want to see if, by me sharing a couple things, if this will help you determine, using the chat box, whether it's a high C or high S. So if you notice, the one thing that will be the same between the two is there's a lot of information. They want to make sure in both cases it's either accuracy or it's an offering to make sure the team is well set up, right? So in both cases, there's a lot of very pertinent information in there. But you're also going to notice, for those of you, well, I'll put it this way. Let me see if the chat box says anything before I tell you more.
We're getting a lot of S's coming through.
Oh, gold star to all of you. Okay, let me tell you why, so that it makes a little bit more sense. If you notice, all the pieces are in there about this meeting, but there's also a lot of people orientation connecting things like warm regards, looking forward to seeing you. We're working together to increase the success for all of us. So a lot of that verbiage tells you that there's a people orientation. If this were the same email put out by a high C, and sometimes work requires this because it's very, very clear, is it will be either bulleted with or numbered with some of this information, and it's going to be a little bit more task oriented in it won't necessarily say hello Sam, it won't necessarily say warm regards. It's going to be a little bit more just with the information, all the information you're going to need, and there you go. So some companies require that when they're talking to people out in the field that they be as concise as possible. So some people will stretch, much like the gal who mentioned she stretched to be a C at work. That makes sense. Absolutely.
We've got a great comment. Someone says, I'm a higher C and I've learned to write my email and then I go back to the beginning and put in my greeting. So that's great. And I just am finishing up coaching someone where emails were a big part of her feedback initially, that she wrote really curt emails and people were just looking for a little niceties, and she would email people and it would just say, I need this by tomorrow, period, and that's it. And she started off by saying, well, I don't have time to write niceties and, I'm busy. And we worked through, well, how much longer does it really take to say, how's it going? And then say what you need. So
Yeah.
I can appreciate your comment.
Yeah, definitely kudos to the self-awareness on that, because it's not easy. We have a natural style and we're asking ourselves to stretch. So good job on that. This is an example of tips for emails where on the left-hand side, this is, if you're receiving this from someone, you can see, like we just did, we can guess their style a little bit. And some of the tips, as much that we can do, like Catherine mentioned, we might want to adapt or stretch a little bit to offer back how they are, to mirror that a little bit. And don't forget, we have some good stuff for you at the end of the webinar that will be a much larger extended cheat sheet for various style interactions, which is really exciting. So we'll get to that a little bit later. You can go ahead and do one more click, which will bring up that other arrow. But there are some styles that naturally have a little bit more of a challenge adapting to one another. And I love using DISC for mediation, because oftentimes when I'm called into a company to use DISC for mediation, this is what we're seeing, is that it really comes down to style differences that are clashing with one another. And by being made aware of that, it can really help alleviate a lot of that taking it personal part out of it. So for example, if you have a high I whose pace is very fast and very people oriented, and you have a C whose pace is more deliberate and task oriented, there's going to be some clashing there. The high I might come across very exuberant and dominating with this energy, whereas the high C is really just trying to get stuff done. Right? The high D, you can see again, is fast paced but task oriented. And then that S, if they're a high S, is going to be more deliberate and people oriented. So you have someone who's trying to be accommodating and pleasing while someone's trying to hurry up and get stuff done. You can see there might be a suppression of voice, especially if that high D happens to be in any kind of power distance, like a boss or a superior of some way, can really suppress the voice of a high S. So Catherine, did you want to speak a little bit more to that? And oh, I do want to say one thing, and this is kind of a fun place to put it, is we've often heard of the golden rule, right? Do unto others the way that we would do unto ourselves. And what DISC is asking you to do is something slightly different. It's the platinum rule. It's asking you to do unto others the way they would want you to do unto them. So that means that there's some level of adapting and stretching to each other's style that we're asking people to do.
Yeah, and I get the question a lot as I was a former college teacher teaching communication courses, and even now I get this from my coaching clients where they say, well, why do I have to be the one to adapt to them? Why can't they bend to me? And the answer is effective communicators are good at adapting to the other person's style. That's the definition of a competent communicator in the years of academic research on communication. So imagine that if you're communicating with another person, if you're both attempting to stretch to the other person's preferences or what the other person needs, then the ability to share meaning and create relationships is much greater. So as a leader, it's definitely up to you to focus on sort of bending or adapting to the other side. Your team may not be so self-aware of it, and that's something you can work with them on over time. but really and truly, that's what competent communicators do. They're able to gauge how other people communicate and sort of mirror that. And so it's important to do that, to have effective relationships at work. So what we're going to do is make webinar history by doing some skits. I don't know that I've ever seen a webinar with a skit in it. And so turn up your speakers, and we've got a little skit that Tony and I recorded, and Josh, our admin assistant, is our sort of radio voice, and he's going to offer up some details since you can't see us. So we're just testing your knowledge here again. So listen carefully to what you hear, and then make a guess about who is communicating here, which two styles are interacting. So here we go.
Catherine and Tony meet by the water cooler Monday morning. Catherine's eyes are downcast and focused on the list in her hand.
Hey, Tony. I went ahead and listed down some thoughts on what we should review for this week's meeting agenda.
Tony places her hand on Catherine's shoulder. Catherine shows discomfort with his touch.
Hey, Catherine, how'd your weekend go? Oh, I got tickets to the local theater house and watched the Nutcracker this weekend. Those dancers are so amazing.
Catherine furrows her brow and is visibly disgruntled with the conversation off topic.
Yeah, I've been to a couple of shows there. Hey, since it's our first meeting, I want to go over objectives, team rules, and our ideal schedule. I've explored best practices, and I thought it would be good to send out to everyone prior to the meeting.
Tony tries to influence her point by adding extra energy and ideas. She also steps closer to Catherine and enters her personal space.
Don't you think it'd be more beneficial for everyone to get to know one another? It's only our first meeting as a group. Hey, I have an idea. What about a game? Oh, wait, better yet, what if we go on an excursion and get the creative thoughts flowing?
Catherine backs away and looks confused and suspicious.
Do you think that's imperative? I mean, we're on a pretty strict timeline.
Tony now looks a little confused and slightly bummed.
Well, how are we expected to perform together as a team if we don't even know one another?
Yeah, let's just get the job completed.
Catherine walks away slowly, and Tony is left shaking her head while looking somewhat disappointed.
All right, so go ahead. Some of you have already typed in your answers, but go ahead, those of you who haven't, type in your responses. All right, we've got some various answers. We've got a D and a C. We've got an I and a C, maybe another D and an I. And we have a comment from Rebecca, our wonderful consultant's mom. She says we're doing a good job. So thanks, Rebecca's mom. All right, and a few people said it was hard to hear. So my apologies on that. We did our best to get that through, but it sounds like several of you did hear it. So Tony, I'll let you speak to who was responding or who was talking in our skit.
Okay, so if you notice, we had someone who was very task oriented, very focused on making sure the accuracy of what needed to get out there was out there. They wanted to send out information in advance so that the participants were ready. And then you had someone who really just wanted to share all about their exciting time with this thing that had nothing to do with work. So if you guessed it was a C and an I, you are correct.
All right. We're going to do one more of these.
Catherine and Tony meet by the water cooler Monday morning. Catherine's eyes are downcast and
Oh,
focused on the
it sounds like the same one, Catherine.
Hey, Tony. I went ahead and listed down some thoughts on what we should review for this week's meeting. Uh-oh. All right, we're going to have to skip it. Now it's playing and I can't get it to stop. Okay, hold on. Crisis, avert the crisis. Okay, now they're both playing. Hold on. I've been to a couple shows there. Okay.
Okay. So I can just tell you very quickly, the second one was going to showcase a D and an S. And the gal who was the S was very excited to share all the due diligence that she had done looking for this company picnic venue, right? And the high D came along, didn't even say good morning, just said, hey, what are my options for the company picnic? And the high S very excitedly was sharing, like, she was looking for ones that were family friendly and pet friendly. And the high D just cut her off and said, hey, look, what do I need to see? And so she showcased her paperwork that showed the top 3 picks, and the D said, okay, yeah, this one, and walked away, didn't say thank you. Because for the high D, it was really about, okay, I need to make sure this box is checked, done, good. For the high S, it was about really concerning herself with making sure everyone on the team felt like they were included, whether they had kids or dogs or whatever. And so, of course, these are extreme cases, but it showcases how a D and an S, especially in that power distance that I mentioned earlier, can really suppress the voice and really suppress the style of individuals and create distance and mistrust.
All right, so I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about employee engagement. You know, obviously, engagement is about creating opportunities for people to give their all. Employee engagement is about maximum discretionary effort. You want your employees to 100% of the time give as much effort as they possibly can. And of course, none of us do that 100% of the time. So the idea behind employee engagement initiatives that organizations are really focused on these days is that the more you can get somebody to give you their all, you know, the more often they do that, the better their work will be, the more connected they'll be to the organization, et cetera. So here at Civility Partners, we define employee engagement as the extent to which an employee has self-efficacy or believes that they have the ability to overcome challenges. That's what self-efficacy is about. Engaged employees believe that they fit into the organization and they're inspired. So these are the 3 areas that you need to focus on in building employee engagement. And so we thought it would be fun to tie DISC to employee engagement a little bit. So, you know, one thing to think about with efficacy, again, efficacy is about your employees believing that they can accomplish the goals that they've been, or that are before them, or accomplish the challenges that are set before them. So you want to consider how job tasks match your employees' DISC profiles. So for example, right now in the state that we're in, we have one client who went remote pretty quickly, and that was smart because now we're all working remote, but they were one of our first clients to do it. And right away, one of the employees created a team space there in their team intranet that they had, and so every day at noon, this employee and a second employee that he brought into it, you know, they post questions so that everybody can kind of get a break and chat with each other. So I'm assuming that employee is a high I because he was looking for ways to help everybody connect, and I'm sure he's really wanting to connect as well. So a high I's challenge might be that it's hard to follow through. You know, they get focused on the people stuff and the connection. And so you want to make sure that if you're a high I or you have team members who are high I's, that there are some checks and balances in place to follow through. You may not want your high I to be focused on real detailed work. So, you know, those are the kinds of things you want to be thinking about as you're assigning tasks and assignments. And again, especially right now, everybody's being forced to stretch. So how can you assign these new types of tasks depending on people's different preferences? You know, you can also communicate your assignments with an emphasis on preferences. So high C's really want that direction and clarity. So you might want to lean on them to, you know, do scheduling or calendaring. I know some of my clients are on here. One lovely lady in particular, that's a big part of her job, is to schedule a very complicated calendar. And so I would suspect that she's a high C. High D's, you know, again, can add stress to already stressed out workforce with the go, 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 let's get things done. So us high D's, we've really got to be aware of how we're communicating, especially right now. But a high D might be a good person to keep things moving forward with clients, for example. So that's how you want to be thinking as you're divvying up these different new assignments that people are all going to be getting as we figure out our new ways of work. I have a couple questions here. I'm going to jump off the webinar in a few minutes for an appointment. Will we get the slides emailed? Yes, you'll get a recording of the this webinar. If you'd like the slide, shoot us an email and we'll send that over. Somebody says our county is implementing some quarantine spirit weeks and we're going to be posting pics on Facebook page. That's the spirit. I like that. I like that. That's a great idea. So in terms of fit, you know, again, considering that disc styles are a form of diversity, of course, we're all focused on diversity and inclusion right now. That's also a big important part of the conversation these days. And so you're going to have different people who need different things. And so consider DISC as part of those diversity and inclusion initiatives. So for example, you might have a high C who their contributions may not be as obvious if they're sort of in the background being analytical, but they're still, of course, very important to your organization and your team. So making sure that they're also celebrated versus maybe a high I who, you know, is easily acknowledged and noticed for all the things that they're doing because they're out there and smiling and connecting. You want to make sure you're awarding people appropriately. So as a high I as well, I know that I do like a little public acknowledgement. Feel free to give me a round of applause if I ever meet you in public.
You're doing a great job,
Thanks. You too, Tony. You're doing fabulous. But you know, versus a high S or C, they might not want that public recognition. So just considering how you award and reward people also, and how people manage conflict. So part of fitting into an organization is that you're able to resolve conflict with the people you work with. And we actually had a recent case study that Tony engaged in. So Tony, tell us about our case study.
Yeah, this is one of those, I mean, it was just, if I had to write it in a book, it would be perfect, because there was an owner of a company and two employees that were having high conflict, and they were both very, very key employees to her that worked in the office. And one was a high C and one was a high I, which, as we know, according to DISC, already have some challenges adapting. And they absolutely fit into the model of their style. And so when I met with the owner, I said, you know, I haven't met your employees yet, but I can imagine this is what some of it looks like. And I was just speaking from DISC, and she said, how is it that you know them? How are you reading their minds? And I said, no, it's just DISC. And so when we actually sat down to do a mediation, the three of them and me, it was amazing to see the light bulbs come on, like, oh, I was taking personally, which is clearly just your style. And it's nice to hear a report from them now that things are much better. There's still some differences. They might not ever be Starbucks buddies, right? But what they're able to do is at work, they're
Very cool, thank you. So lastly, the third piece of employee engagement is inspiration, right? So you're never gonna get employees who give you their all unless they're inspired by the work that you as an organization are doing, and they need to be inspired by their own work tasks and their impact that they're having on the organization and your customers. So for example, a high S will probably be inspired by that collaboration and the opportunity to help others out. And so right now is a great time for them to really shine and find ways to collaborate, and they're going to be good at sort of stabilizing fears. The high C is motivated by opportunities to use their expertise and to gain knowledge. So they're really going to want to understand their place in the system within an organization, and they're going to be motivated by understanding where they fit in the organization and why they're doing what they do. And to some extent, of course, we all need that information. Humans need the why. But for a high C, that's going to be super important. So right now, if you're working remote, the high C cannot necessarily see what everybody else in the workplace is doing because you're all remote. So the high C is going to need some constant communication about where they fit in everything. A high I is certainly motivated by group activities. They're motivated by taking action and connecting. So they're going to be inspired by teamwork. So you're not going to get motivation and employee engagement from a high I if they're down in the basement, like that movie, what is it, Office Space. You know, you have to motivate a high I by giving them opportunities to connect. And then a high D is, of course, inspired by results and getting things done. They need to be able to make quick decisions. So you're not going to get motivation from a high D if they have to work in a team that takes, you know, months and months to make decisions. That's going to be very frustrating for them, and that will demotivate them. So we thought it would be fun to sort of tie DISC and employee engagement together. And those are some things to be thinking about, that people need to be given tasks and responsibilities and put in situations where they can really thrive. And as Tony's been saying, we certainly all can stretch and do stretch, but we do have our preferences, and so you want to keep those things in mind as you're moving along and assigning people. Uh-oh, Tony, are you there?
Hello, hello.
Okay.
Okay.
Thought we lost you.
I'm here. So yeah, so DISC is a wonderful way to raise self-awareness as well as develop our personal leadership and emotional intelligence. I love that that has been brought into the conversation today. So taking time to do some additional self-reflection, like we've already heard some of our participants sharing their level of awareness around how they communicate a little bit differently, which is awesome. And then here are some other tips to consider for each one of the styles. If you're a very high I, one thing to consider is really making it people first instead of task first. And that's a huge shift. That's a big ask. But some of the ways that can happen would be perhaps to use a little bit softer tone, giving people time to process and think. So it's going to require a little bit more patience as you watch people noodle on something for a little bit. And then perhaps consider not being so pushy. You know, if you're pushing for something and you see the person really isn't ready to respond yet, see if you can offer a time to circle back around. So it gives them time to process and think and come up with your answer that you're needing. And it saves you the frustration of waiting for them in the time and place. So what it'll do is the gain is you'll increase the comfort level of others to improve cooperation and inclusion from them. High I's, some things to consider is you want to make sure to get organized. I'm a high I, and sometimes I love spinning plates. And so what I do is I make lists, and sometimes even when I do something that's not on my list, I'll put it on my list and check it off. I don't know why I'm happy about lists, but it really does make me happy. It's a great thing for eyes to stay focused. So be mindful of any extraneous information or playfulness, especially on, most of us are having to do Zoom meetings or Zoom interactions, is that we really want to help the other styles be able to feel like they're staying on task and on agenda. And then be credible. You'll want to follow through on your commitments. So if you're being tasked something, make sure that it's getting done. And this will increase trust from others as they can count on you and on your dependability to complete tasks. For high S's,
It's a coming.
what's that?
I said it's a coming. The slides sometimes delay.
No worries, no worries. So yeah, for high S's, you know, like I mentioned earlier, this is not usually a very happy feeling time, all of this change and people feeling stressed. It's going to be a time for you to show your confidence through sharing your thoughts and feelings, which absolutely matter. It's going to be a stretch to embrace these changes and challenges. And one fun tip that I have for people who are really high S that really don't like change is remember what the word fear actually is. It's an acronym. It stands for false evidence appearing real. So all of this stress that's going on, we can just take a moment, take a breath, do some self-care. We're all going to be all right. One of the gains would be that you're going to increase the interest of others to hear your opinion and express your needs. And lastly, our high C, some tips for them is don't overdo the details. So if you information overload people, they're gonna tune out, or they're gonna only skim your emails. So Try not to overdo it. Remember that, again, for your case, it's going to be focusing on people first instead of the task first. So adding those few extra moments to connect is going to be really important. And then if you are on Zoom and you're lost in your head in thought, make sure you smile. That's a big tip for C's. And what helps is this will increase the comfort of others during communication and allow you to be more approachable.
All right, so why'd you show up today? Well, you showed up because you wanted to be a better communicator and a better leader, and maybe you're focused on your team and helping them be better communicators and better leaders. And there's a couple ways to go about doing that. You can kind of wait things out. Certainly, there's a lot going on right now, and you can think to yourself, well, let's wait out the COVID, and then we'll maybe take some classes, and I can coach some people. And so you can take the tortoise approach and improve in your leadership skills over a long period of time, or you can take the hare approach. And DISC is a really cool thing where you can dive right into your skills and preferences and learn where your opportunities of improvement are, where your opportunities to stretch are, and you can really quickly implement some leadership tips in order to improve and be more of an effective leader right now rather than waiting. So we wanted to offer you a gift today, and our gift is Tony. Just kidding. Yay! Sort of. Our gift is that we're offering, for you to take the DISC assessment, and what you get is a really cool, comprehensive report that talks a lot about your, kind of your general characteristics. It gives you a lot of information about what motivates you, what your ideal work environment is, what you need, and where your areas for development are, and also a lot of tips on how to communicate with other people on your team and given their DISC profiles. And so, particularly right now, understanding your strengths is going to be key as you're making decisions about how to get things done and how to assign work and what to focus on. And if you're leading a team, and decide that you and your team are all going to take this assessment, it'll help you understand the strengths of your team members, and then you can assign them work where they'll thrive and understand what their fears are and how you can communicate with them in the best way. So what we're offering is essentially the DISC assessment for up to 5 team members, and then each of you will get a 30-minute individual coaching call with Tony. And then Tony will do a 90-minute customized live and interactive Zoom training with you. And so normally something like this would be around $3,700. And we are, of course, offering an opportunity for you today to do something a little bit different. So if you purchase the 5 assessments and schedule your coaching calls and training with Tony before April 30, we'll give it all to you for $2,500. And if you purchase here in the next couple of weeks, you'll get 3 additional assessments, and of course those 3 additional coaching sessions that go along with the assessments. So this is a really great opportunity. And just so you know too, our DISC assessments are more comprehensive than most, and so your coaching is really highly targeted to you specifically. And then the group training is customized based on the team's different preferences. And actually recently we had a client or a potential client we were talking to, and they've done assessments with a vendor in the last year, and they only received a 2-page report from that vendor. But our report's around 20 pages, 25 pages. And so it's just a lot more comprehensive. You're gonna get a lot more information than perhaps some other vendors. So I know you might be thinking, for some reason it's stuck and won't let me go to the next slide. You might be thinking that this stuff is better face-to-face, that you want to wait out until COVID is over so that you can do a DISC training in person. You might be thinking that you don't have time for something like this right now. I know we're all spending a lot of time just kind of figuring out what we're doing and how we're going to do it. Or you might be thinking that this feels like an extra expenditure that you shouldn't be focusing on right now. but I'll tell you that right now your team needs you more than ever. You need this to be the best leader that you can be. There is not a predictable end to all of this, and your teams, need to be flourishing right now, if anything. People are stressed, so let's make it easier on them. In high stress, our communication defaults to our natural preferences, and let's face it, stress is going to bring out the worst in us. Stress tends to bring out the worst in all of us. So DISC offers the opportunity to bring out the best strengths in your people. So also consider that if your team was already having some conflict or high stress relationships, and now we're in an even higher stress situation, that giving them DISC is a way to reduce that stress that comes along with that relationship that was already high stress, so that they can be more productive right now. So right now, more than ever, you need effective, productive teams, and DISC is a great way to get that moving. So DISC, just really provides a laser focus on communication and how to work well together. So again, what we're offering is DISC assessments for up to 5 team members. Then each of those team members get 30-minute individual coaching calls with Tony, and then you'll get a 90-minute customized live and interactive Zoom training. And you've heard Tony speak today. She does a great job at being interactive and finding ways to incorporate the audience. And of course, through Zoom, you'd all be able to speak to each other as opposed to typing in. So there's no reason to hold off. And again, the assessment or all of this is normally $3,700, but if you do this before April 30, it's $2,500. And if you purchase by March 27, you'll get the 3 additional assessments and coaching. And now, maybe these numbers don't fit in with your team size. Maybe you have 10 people on your team or 4 people on your team. Of course, we want to offer something to you as well. So please do, shoot us an email, and we're happy to talk about it with you. So what do you do? How do you get a hold of this offer? You're going to email Rebecca. There she is, Rebecca@civilitypartners.com. And just let her know. You can also email her if you want the slides or the recording. Shoot her an email, and she'll be happy to help you get what you need. So again, email Rebecca, and if you're interested in the offer, just let her know. So we do have, I think, a couple minutes for some final questions. If anybody has any additional questions about DISC or the offer, by all means, shoot them over and let's chat. So go ahead and type into the questions box. Any final questions on DISC? And while they're doing that, Tony, I'll let you give us some kind of final thoughts.
I just want to say thank you again to everyone who made time for this today, and just grateful for the level of interaction. There was some great shares, just people already looking for ways to stretch and work with one another. And for me, I have a personal value of just treating people with dignity, and it's beautiful to see so many people interested in wanting to improve communication with others. So just thank you for your commitment to that.
Yeah. Thanks for that. And we do have a couple questions. One person says, I would like to take the assessment myself. So it's just one person maybe who's interested. So go ahead and again, email Rebecca, and she will help make arrangements for that. We're of course absolutely happy to do the assessment with just one person, and then you'll still get that coaching call with Tony. From there, if you want to do your team, that's great too. I have another question. How common is a high D and a high I altogether? Any ideas, Tony, how common the D and the I are?
So what's interesting is the profile that we saw earlier, where you have both a high D and a high I, and the other 2 were below the energy line. That's what's known as the entrepreneur. Many entrepreneurs have a very similar profile to that. And there's actually certain categories that certain profiles fall under that have additional nuance to what that means. And so having a D and an I is common. And in some cases, and I think that you can probably speak to this, Catherine, like when you have to pay more attention or when one comes out versus the other, what that might look like, because you're both task and people oriented, but you're in the pacing of it, both of those are very fast. And so that's a place where you can easily mow over some of the more deliberate styles, right? With wanting to get stuff done, with having the exuberance, with being people oriented, with wanting to create expediency. So it, again, everything comes down to being mindful of how that comes across.
Yeah, no, and I'm, like I said, I'm a high D and a high I, and I can, when you say that's entrepreneurs often, you know, obviously I'm an entrepreneur owning Civility Partners, so that resonates with me, and definitely high D. Even during the webinar, when we were playing the skit, I was thinking, when's it over? Is it almost over? And I so desperately wanted to see the line move across the little bar. So I knew when it was over, but that's just that high D. So that's very cool. And so that, you know, one thing that Tony actually did the disc in our office, and Tony discovered that everybody actually had been given job tasks and assignments that really fit their profile. And so as the high D and I'm running the company, and then we have our admin assistant, and his tasks and what he was doing were, you know, fit perfectly for him. And we've got Rebecca and what she was doing. And so that was kind of an interesting, cool experiment. So we're out of time. We will go ahead and turn the webinar off. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Shoot Rebecca an email and she'll send you the slides. We've got a really cool sort of handout with some cool stuff in it for you. And if you're interested in the offer, just let Rebecca know and we'll get working on arranging that. And again, right now more than ever, your leadership and communication skills are key. So don't wait. Don't be thinking I'll do all this when all of this mess that we're in blows over, because now is the time that you want to be honing in on your leadership skills and your communication skills, because that's what's needed now more than ever. So thanks again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.